Hi, everyone. Bill Kenny here, and welcome to Pavilion Pitfalls. It's a real pleasure to have you here today, and I think this topic is going to be one that'll be a lot of fun for all of us. Um, so, our audience today, the real target of this webinar are economic development professionals. Not that it won't be there'll be good content for general exhibitors, but as you'll see as we go through, the content is really directed to folks who are hosting pavilions, and those typically are either people that work for a country or a state or a municipality. And it can also be larger associations that are hosting pavilions at a variety of different types of national or global trade shows, and so that again, that's really who this content's going to be developed around and really aim to help. So buckle up. This is going to be a lot of fun, and hopefully you get a lot out of it. Um, the other thing to mention is what we're really trying to do, and what an development professional is trying to do with the pavilion is really execute on two objectives, which is what makes hosting pavilions a little bit more complex. And so, on one hand, they're trying to recruit companies to their region to grow the economic base of that region, and so they want the pavilion to be as attractive as possible to get new ventures, new companies to their region, and or expanding companies to their region. And the other is the exhibiting partner companies within the pavilion host wants them to increase sales. So that idea of sort of economically growing both by attracting more businesses into a region and then also by helping the businesses from that region grow. And so this is a lot of what we're going to talk about today as we get into this. And so I'm going to, kind of the format here is I'm going to go off screen and we'll have some slides up for a good part of the webinar, and then I'll come back on screen at the end and answer questions. You should see on your screen the ability to ask additional questions, and please feel free to use that. As you'll see, we do have a bunch of already submitted questions that we'll go through, but please don't hesitate to add additional. Just understand I won't see those until I come back on screen. So, but we will get to them, and I promise we'll answer all questions. So it's going to be about a 30-second transition here while I get the slides up, but let's get that going. So we are going to do this, and let me, one quick second, do this again here, and we'll do this. Okay. So theoretically, you should be seeing my slides up on your screen. And so let's hop in. And again, the idea here is we want to use pavilions to nurture economic growth. So we want to see our little seedling here grow, and we'll do that through both attracting new companies to our region and then also helping companies from our region grow their pool of prospects and ultimately their sales. So pavilions can take many forms, but this might be what you're envisioning. But again, they can take many forms. But the idea is they're representing a specific geographic region or a specific industry, and can typically have somewhere between 6 and 30 different exhibitors within them, plus the host exhibitor. Who's a little bit different or more complicated agenda than the individual exhibitor. So our agenda is going to be pretty straightforward. We're going to talk about the purpose of the purpose of a pavilion, almost hard to say there, and then the common challenges in pavilion hosting. Talk about some solutions, and then how do we measure all this and look to have continuous improvement. And then again, we'll certainly address all of your questions. These are the questions that were pre-submitted, and we've kind of categorized them to make them a little bit easier to go through and to make sure that we have as complete an answer for you as possible. Again, add to this and and or we can talk afterwards as well. So there's all sorts of ways that will get you the answers you're looking for. So just so we have some context, so you have a little bit about me. Again, my name is Bill Kenny. I'm the founder and client advocate for a company called Meet. And what we do is help growth companies and economic development agencies effectively exhibit at trade shows. So the growth companies are often going to new markets, and that may mean new countries. And then the economic development agencies certainly are going to a variety of trade shows and bringing along with them representative companies from their region to exploit sales opportunities. And so as a company, we have sort of four general ways that we help. Number one is strategy, sort of identifying the right plan, the right shows to go to. We'll provide staffing for the booth and the pavilion, and we'll help the executives get speaking opportunities at trade shows, and then also will help with a variety of sales support items like pre-setting appointments or setting appointments post-event and so on. So enough about us. So the purpose of a pavilion is to identify quality prospects, and we really want to keep what we're aiming to do and our goals really simple because we want to be very direct and precise about hitting them. And so most of, I mean, 100% of our work is business to business, B2B. So our customers are aiming at always at getting prospects. It's really unusual in a business to business world that you could convert customers on the show floor. That's not normal. And so we want to make sure that we go in with the right expectation. I think that's part of the challenge in some cases is some folks have an unachievable expectation when they go to shows. And ultimately, it's really about, if there are 10,000 people at the show, it's really about finding the 100 or 200 or 300 that are prospects. And so we really want to develop tactics and strategies to be able to do that. So the common challenges, and you'll see as we go through, we've separated out the sort of recommendations that we're going to have. We'll identify these common challenges, and then we'll look at the solutions. One will be for the pavilion host in terms of addressing their recruiting, identifying and recruiting of companies to come to their region. And then the other will be, again, addressing the pavilion host and how they can help prepare the company, the exhibiting companies within their booth. And so, again, looking to kind of help with both of those objectives. So challenges number one is sort of the pavilion host identifying and enrolling quality companies to move or open offices in their region. And so, that can be, not being at the right show. That can be not having the right message or offer. There can be all sorts of underlying challenges within that, and not having properly prepared personnel. I think you can kind of go on and on and on, but ultimately, as when you debrief after the show, what you end up finding is that the challenge is that you're not seeing the kind of quality companies who would be prospects to move to the region. And when we talk about prospects, I want to make sure we have a common definition for a prospect. A prospect has three qualities, and they have to have all three of these qualities to be a prospect. And so what we end up finding is one of the challenges people have is they tend to stretch the definition of a prospect because there's some sort of scarcity mentality, right? And so we want to make sure that we are very precise in who we believe a prospect is. So a prospect has to have a need. They need to have money or the resource to be able to fulfill that need. And then three, they need to be urgent. They need to have a sense of urgency, or else it may be valuable but not actionable. And so we want to talk to people, and we want to uh, really aim to convert people who are essentially are urgent for what we need. And so a lot of what we work around will be, how do we find those individuals or companies that are both that have a need, have money to fulfill that need, and then third, are urgent to fulfill that need. So the second challenge for the pavilion hosts is keeping their exhibiting companies fully leveraged within the trade show opportunity. Um, and the interesting thing here is that, so the pavilion host can go through lots of work to make sure that they have the right offer, and that their messaging is good, and that their team is prepared, and their space within the pavilion looks great and attractive. But you think about whether your pavilion has 10 or 20 or 30 companies within it, they're your best brochure. And so making sure that they're prepared and they're executing well, and that they're complementing each other is just as important as the pavilion hosts preparation and execution. And so the pavilion host really has two jobs within this: not only preparing themselves, but making sure that you're attracting, recruiting, and engaging partner companies that are going to essentially be your best brochure. Imagine, and we go to trade shows all the time, and we walk by pavilions as we do that. And, a typical show, there might be anywhere from, a couple to, a dozen, or even, 2 dozen pavilions. And it's always interesting, to see the ones that are well executed versus those that aren't. And typically the ones that you wouldn't want to spend a lot of time at are the ones that, the partner companies are just not engaged, not prepared. It's really clear when you walk by. And I think when you look at recruiting companies, they're going to walk to regions that look vibrant, that have companies in them that are well engaged, and are look like they're healthy, and all those types of things. So all real key. So let's begin talking about some solutions for these. And there, with each, as we talk through the pavilion host solutions for their sort of promotion at the show, we'll talk through those, and then we'll go over to how do we prepare the partner companies. So looking at the pavilion, obviously, again, another form of pavilion here, all sorts of different designs for these. But the number one thing that we find is key is, again, we've talked through the idea of, making sure we're precise about this, but making sure that we understand the best events for us to participate in is really key. Having a thorough view of what's available versus what our goals are is important. And so as we look at show selection, we want to first understand our target persona. And what I mean by persona is, when we think about who would be most likely and the best type of company to move to our region, what type of employee base do we have? What are our economic goals? What industries are in need of, sort of specific types of support companies, supply chain or whatnot. And so as we begin doing that work, we'll begin developing a target persona. In other words, not just the types of companies, not just the industries, but who within those companies is our target. And very important to make this as narrow as possible, really, really key. So when you think about mapping these personas, there are going to be a variety of things that we look at. So again, it could be target industries. What will complement what we have now, and there may be a variety of factors we look at there. What are sort of the key attributes that we'll look at in terms of the dynamics? Maybe we have some history of recruiting and have had some success stories, and we want to duplicate those success stories. Or maybe we're going into an industry or a sector that we don't have that much density in and don't have that much success in. And so, what we're going to do is create a hypothesis about who that persona is that we want to attract, but we want to be very precise, whether it's from sort of a history of success or whether it's from the most logical sort of way that we can evolve the best guess or the best hypothesis. The other thing we want to understand as we look at the key attributes is, what dynamics are going on for a company that would be a good target. Did they just get venture funding? Are they already in, some tangential geographies that our geography would be the next logical step? There are going to be some indicators that are publicly available of when companies would be predisposed to be interested in expanding and or expanding specifically to our region. And so we want to make sure that we begin being observant of what those are. And then that will help us again identify within the 10 or 20 or 100,000 attendees, the very small subset that we want to talk to. And when we think about why personas are so important, maybe the best analogy here is fishing. So think about what somebody that fishes does. So they, before somebody that goes to fish, a fisherman or fisherwoman, before they go to fish, they pretty much know what they want to catch, whether they're going into a lake, a pond, a river, an ocean, a sea, any of those. They know what type of fish they want to catch, and so they will bring the right equipment for that. They will either be on a boat or shore or wearing waders up to their chest so that they can walk into the river. They will bring the right bait. They will plan on the right amount of time to attract that. They'll go at the right time of day. There are all sorts of elements that somebody that fishes well brings to bear to catch the right fish. Even though there are hundreds and thousands of types of fish in the bodies of water that they might fish, they're after one specific type. And because they're after one specific type, they bring the equipment and the bait that's appropriate for that type of fish. And other fish aren't attracted to it. And that's good because those aren't the fish they want to catch. That's a lot the same in what we want to do when we develop buyer personas. I should mention this coming Tuesday, and we'll talk more about this at the end, we're actually going to spend a ton of time. We've got a webinar at noon on Tuesday that's all about buyer personas. And we're going to go kind of deep into the weeds to help you uncover who your buyer personas are. So the challenge of doing a 1-hour workshop that's on a broad topic is we can't dive too deep into any one of these. So we're going to go much deeper on Tuesday in this. So here's our fisherman. And again, wearing boots because he knew he was going to be in the water, definitely freshwater gear that he's using, and undoubtedly some type of freshwater bait or even a fly that he's casting out into the lake. And it's also either early morning, or it looks probably early morning with the fog there. So all of these things, sort of tell us that if we want to catch a specific fish, we have to come with the specific bait, the specific equipment to do that. And you'll want to do the exact same thing when you apply this to your pavilion and your exhibiting. So we want to use, as we're looking at the sea of different events, and you may assess, 50, 100, even hundreds of events in order to get to the few that you want to do on an annual basis. And ultimately, these decisions are going to be much better made if they're criteria based. And as we develop scoring for our customers, often we'll even weight criteria. So some criteria will be more valuable than others based on what our objectives are. And so as you're looking at these, it's not only important to do this for you sort of making the initial decisions, but as you go to make and adjust your decisions over time, that will be criteria based as well. And your criteria will improve because your experience improves and the market is dynamic. So not only are there new and better and different types of events coming onto the marketplace, but who you're aiming after, who your target persona is, will evolve. And so your methodologies will evolve. Your experiences will tell you that certain hypotheses you had or have were correct and other hypotheses were not correct. And so it's really a matter of adjusting to that. So if you start with a logic-based process, then maintaining a logic-based process and adjusting your logic as you go along will make your decisions better and better. And you'll see as at the end, there's a lot of future values in doing this. So the next sort of opportunity here is we want to have an offer once we've determined what shows we're going to, and then who we want to attract at those shows specifically. Then we want to have an offer that is aligned and relevant for our buyer persona. And you'll see up on the screen here, I'm showing an iPad giveaway, which is the normal that we see. At least 10 of these are being offered at every show we walk through, and maybe more. And so, and there are other giveaways, flat screen TVs, et cetera, et cetera. Now, if you're in the business of selling electronics, then maybe giving away an iPad makes sense. I'd even argue that at this point, an iPad is not a new device, and the people that you would attract, people who don't have iPads are probably not early adopters for what, for your electronics. And so it may not be a relevant giveaway. But certainly, if you're not selling electronics and specifically iPads, then giving away an iPad makes absolutely no sense, because all it's going to do at the very best is essentially fill up your card bowl with a quantity of the average attendee. They will not at all be specific or relevant for you. And so you'll have clogged up your booth for the 2, 3, or 4 days of the event with people who aren't prospects, or a large percentage of whom are not prospects. So play that forward as we talk to sales professionals or business development professionals who are following up on the leads that either they generate in the booth through these methods, or that the marketing team generates and then hands off. Salespeople are the most frustrated by trade shows, and that's because they end up, sort of having to follow up on a stack of cards afterwards that are completely inefficient. They're people who have no interest whatsoever in the product or service. They don't have the need, they don't have the money, and they aren't urgent. Not a prospect at all. And even if they had 2 of the 3, they're still not a prospect today. They may be in the future, but they're not today. And so we want to have an offer, but it's got to be persona relevant. We don't want to do the iPad giveaway. So the way to evolve what offer makes the most sense is to really work hard and think about what are your target persona's biggest challenges? What are their biggest concerns? What are they, what keeps them up at night? And then you want to have an offer that will give them information, knowledge, skills, and show them a pathway to solving that concern. And so it might be more information on the topic. Maybe there are new regulations that have come out, whatever the case might be, but it might be invitation to a webinar like this. It might be a white paper. It might be a survey or an opportunity for an assessment. There are all sorts of things. And the key is it's not really that critical what you offer and that you even deliver on that offer. Once you get people to stop and opt in, then the offer from your standpoint it has served its purpose. Certainly, you want to deliver the webinar, you want to deliver the white paper, you want to deliver the survey and do the assessment and all those types of things. But the real goal, so you want to remove as much as possible from the booth other than the offer. You don't need products, you don't need services. All you want people to do is stop and say, boy, that offer interests me. That's a topic or a subject that's keeping me up at night. That's the best thing you can hear. And so you've now taken, the 10,000 people in the room or the 100,000 people in the room, and you found one really good prospect. And that will happen as the day goes on. You'll find another one and another one and another one. And again, these are worth probably 100 of the average attendee, or maybe even 1,000 of them. And so you want to use these offers to get people to stop in the aisle and say, wow, that's interesting, that's a challenge we're having, tell me more, how do I get in on this offer that you have. And but think of how you would promote this offer a lot like how you experience billboards. So there's a rule in billboard advertising that you don't want to have any more than 7 words, and in our case here, that might even be a lot. And so you think of a billboard, you're driving by it, whether it's 20 or 30 or 50 or 100 miles an hour, whatever it might be, and you have to be able to take in the message while you're in motion. And that's a lot of what happens in trade shows. People think of all the messages people are getting as they're going out down a trade show aisle, and half the people that are going through are introverts, so their eyes aren't on your booth for very long. They're certainly not making eye contact, and so you want to quickly separate yourself out with something simple that causes, again, only the people you're interested in talking to, causes them to stop and to engage. And then you want to convert them into whatever offer that you have. In other words, what I mean by convert is get them to say, yeah, boy, I'd really like that, and that would be great. Can you send that to me? Can you enroll me in that? Can you sign me up for it? Whatever the sort of the right next steps are. And so getting them, creating an offer that, again, only your prospect is interested in. And again, we're using that offer to separate our prospects from the general attendee, and it's going to be a real minority. Again, think of all the fish in the sea. We want a specific type of fish, and we're going to use a specific bait, and we're going to use a specific equipment to be able to catch them. So pretty simple math here. And what I'm going to talk about is the difference between having sales people or business development people in your booth and having what we would call transaction professionals in the booth. And so they would be people who would be not subject matter experts on how to move to your region or all the tax nuances or anything like that. What these people would be really good at, though, is engaging people in whatever your offer is and being able to distill very quickly, if they're interested in the offer, if this is a pain point for them, and then moving on to the next conversation. So we're just going to do some real simple exhibit math. So if we have salespeople or business development people in the booth, the minimum time for conversations is usually at least 15 minutes and maybe 30 minutes. So as we do the math, we know that in an 8-hour day, the sales conversation, the salespeople are going to talk to no more than 32 people. And if our show has 10,000 or 100,000 people on a percent basis over 2, 3, 4 days, we're not going to talk to very many people overall within the trade show. On the other hand, if we have transaction-based people, what we have here is offer conversations. They'll talk to, if we're using 1 to 2 minutes as our pace, they're going to talk to at least somewhere around 240 people and maybe more through each 8-hour day. And so you're going to look at 7 to 8 times the number of contacts and ultimately a much higher quality lead, and much more of them is really what we're talking about. And that's what we want to have happen. So the less distraction you have in your booth, you don't need the giveaways, because if you do, like, even just simple having pens, that isn't necessarily attracting prospects into the booth. It may be a nice hospitality thing to do, and there may be a reason to do that, and maybe you don't show the pens as available, but you give them out to people that stop. All sorts of ways to do this. But the point is we want to have what causes people to stop be aligned with who we want to talk to, and then we want to move on into the next conversation. We want to sort of convert or close this person for the offer and then move on. So what then do the sales and business development people do? And we want them out of the booth. We want them in one-on-one meetings with people who are at the trade show, who are already in the sales and marketing pipeline. We want them in much richer conversations with people who are considering moving to our area, who already have information, who've maybe done a visit, and we want them to be in substantive conversations outside of the booth. And whether it's a coffee shop or you rent a room or whatever, um, they can also meet with strategic partners. They can do all sorts of other much higher level, more strategic things than being in the booth. And again, they have a different mission. We shouldn't bog them down, just as we shouldn't bog the booth down by sort of long, drawn out conversations, when all we're trying to do in the booth is find the prospects. With every long conversation we have, it's sort of from a sales standpoint, you know 50, 100 people, 1,000 people maybe are walking by the booth, some of whom are probably prospects that we couldn't engage with because there are these long conversations going on. And so we want to be available. The booth, again, is really about just separating the prospects from the general attendee. So yeah, again, use your exhibit to find the prospects, and then you move into a lead nurturing and conversion process to have them move, finally make the decision and move or open in your region. So the third solution that we want to talk about is follow-up. And this is, I think all of these are pains for every organization that we see. Follow-up, the way to think of follow-up is, you've now created this opportunity, this potential energy, these prospects that are, there and ripe the day the event ends. With every ensuing day, they deteriorate, sometimes a little bit, sometimes fairly quickly. Ultimately, the prospects that we create are perishable. And so we want to make sure that not only is our follow-up good, but it's timely, that it's quick and considerate. And so there are so many different ways to follow up, but certainly phone and email are the most common. The more direct and speedy and individual follow-up is, the more likely it is to get a return. And the real goal of what we're trying to do is to set up a time to talk. That's what we want, is to, how do we, set up a time to talk? And that may be that, if they're local enough, that we go and meet with them, or maybe they come to our area, or it's an initial sort of conversation where we're doing an assessment with regard to where that particular business is, and what they need, and what a good target community would be for them to open up another office in. It could be a variety of purposes, but ultimately we want to set up a time to talk. Until we do that, we want to make sure that there are a variety of lead nurturing tools available, and not that these all would be used, but that some and maybe many others might be used as well. But we want, sort of from our trade show, a trade show should be integrated into all of our other forms of marketing, and some of which are on the screen now. So we might go from an interaction and meeting someone at a trade show to the next step, they might be attending a webinar or a workshop. They might get a white paper. We might send them or allow them access to a video tour or a self-assessment, or we might go through an interview, which would be that sort of first meeting. But again, we want to make sure that there is some level of periodic contact with that prospect, not just immediate, but it's ongoing, so that we're building a relationship, we're building trust. They're seeing and separating us out from the others that they're considering, the other regions or areas that they're considering opening up a facility in, so that our region stands out. And so we want to make sure that they get those periodic touches. So we've talked about three solutions for the pavilion host. Now let's talk about three solutions for the client company, the exhibitor that is one of many within the booth. And again, the better they perform, the better our pavilion performs overall. The more people will be attracted to our pavilion, the more people will engage with our exhibitors, and thereby making our region strong, not only because they're creating sales, but because we're going to be more attractive to folks who are looking to open up offices in our region. And so the first thing we want to do here is, as we're looking at the different partner companies who would exhibit, we want to make sure that they're invested in the pavilion. And so, one of the things we see quite often as we talk to pavilion hosts is, gosh, we're the last few people where it's like pulling teeth to get them to participate, and we ended up having to cut our price to get people in, or we gave away the pavilion exhibiting slots, whatever the case might be. But a pavilion is really cooperative marketing. So they're going to pay not only less than they would if they exhibited on their own, but they're going to have the leverage of the promotion of all of their peer group. And so just like that envelope that comes to your house with all the advertisements in it, that's cooperative marketing. A pavilion represents the same value proposition for the exhibitor. It's really leveraging the resources of many to get a really big splash. And so we want them co-invested in a few different ways. Number one is they need to have some cash investment. I think more is better. And to some degree, the more they're willing to pay will tell you how much they're willing to work to make it work, right? The less value you assign to it, the less value they're likely to assign to it as well. And so as they as they're making their decision, as they come on board, they also will need to agree to a minimum set of standards. And so there could be a variety of things included in this, but ultimately they're representing not only themselves when they're at the show, but they're representing the region or the industry that your pavilion is representing as well. And so there's a much higher bar than if they were doing it on their own, and they need to understand that they need to perform at a certain level, not only to be allowed to exhibit this year, but should they fall short, they probably won't be allowed to exhibit next year, and that there are consequences to that. I think it's even foreseeable that you could have a rebate for those that fulfill the last two obligations here. One is getting the minimums, agreeing to and fulfilling the minimum standards that you set, and then also giving in their post-event report. So it might be that you charge them $1,000, just to pick a round number, and they get half of it back if they come to all the training, if they do all the preparation work and execute their booth well, and if they hand in their post-event reporting. And there are lots of ways to create accountability, and there's not a one size fits all. It really depends on your organization. The next is to make sure that there is training and common training for the people who will be in the individual booths, so that they know what's appropriate and what's expected. We don't want to be on our cell phones and texting and all that kind of stuff. Uh, it doesn't look good. We probably don't want chairs in the pavilion. I think there are a lot of things that will make our presence much higher energy and much more attractive. And so ultimately, we want to get people singing from the same sheet of music. So everything from we might want to have training on preparation, pre-setting appointments, what the role of sales is, what the booth team does, how to make connections within the trade show. So the networking component and the competitive intelligence opportunities. And then this is, I think, something that's forgotten a lot is how do you support and refer to your peer exhibitors within the pavilion and also the host? Because ultimately we're there at the as really a guest of the host. And so how do we, sort of make 1 and 1 equal 5 or 10? It's going to be because we're complementing each other and connecting people to each other will really begin to leverage the show. And it's not only in the context of the pavilion and the individual booths, but it's as we're at the receptions, as we're at breakfast, as we're in the gym talking to people who are also there for the same event. It's really being conscious of making those connections and leveraging it for the greater good of everyone in the pavilion. So number three, and this is very much the same challenge that the pavilion host themselves has, and that is follow-up, making sure that we don't allow this perishable item, these wonderful prospects that we've paid so much, both in terms of time and money, to create. We want to make sure that we leverage those quickly. And so a lot of what we end up doing is balancing trade show plans. And often we work with our clients to do less events better because ultimately you don't want to create more potential energy than you can follow up on and convert. And so it's really both about the number of events and the space between them that is part of the formula. Besides, is it the best event? It's also how does it align with everything else that we're doing so that we have a good flow, a continuous flow of productive opportunities to follow up on. And so making sure, and again, this will be very similar to the follow-up that would happen from the host standpoint. We just want to, the follow-up is really about setting up a time to talk and to learn about them and their goals. We do find that using some type of tickler system is really handy. And so, today there are so many electronic reminder tools, whether you have a contact management system or just use a task manager of some kind. But ultimately having a very simple way to remind you and to put your follow-up items in queue so that, each day you've got whatever number of people that you're making contact with and following up with. That's really key. So measuring results and adjusting, which is critical. We've now spent all this money and time. We want to make sure we know how we did, and then continue to evolve our methodologies so that we get more and more out of these opportunities. So our metrics could be in a variety of ways. And again, this should be aligned with what your goals are. And, if you're reporting to others, what are their needs? But some ideas here are, how many leads were created, maybe the number of customers, the number of partner leads, the number of channel or distributor type leads were created. What was our cost per lead? And then how many leads and how much revenue was closed? So what was the ultimate result? And with trade shows, it may be 2 or 3 years. If you're recruiting companies to your region, it might be a fairly long sales cycle. So it's difficult to make, your early decisions will be more based on the number of leads created. But as you go forward, you'll be able to make much better and better sort of value decisions because you'll have some sales or conversion history, which will obviously help you tune it some. So event metrics, so making sure that the stakeholders, the various participants within the pavilion give feedback on the quality of contacts that they found, the traffic, how's the setup, the location, and so on. We want to make sure that we get a 360-degree view of how the show did and how our particular presence did for our various stakeholders. So one of the really cool things you can do as you both plan and use criteria to choose what events to do and then begin measuring results is you can begin comparing the production of your events, which would really be important. So you think about this as you talk to event organizers and how, if you're going to do their event in the coming year, um, for those that are below, for events that are on your list that are performing below whatever your average is, then it's real easy to go back to those organizers and say, hey, we really like your event. You probably have the right people here for us, but it is performing below what we see as a normal. And the cool thing is you can actually show it to them and ask them, engage them as a partner. And it's really simply, what can we do together to improve these numbers? Maybe we're not in the right location. Maybe our cost is too high for what we're getting relative to what else is available in the marketplace. Maybe there are other things, other sort of things that you can do or offer us that will enhance our results. But bring them on board as a partner. Let them help you develop solutions. Exhibiting in events is a long-term strategy. If you're in the B2B world, um, we spend all other forms of marketing. The focus is how do we get in front of a customer? And the cool thing about trade shows and events is you're in front of them. The challenge is they're not identified, right? They're in a sea of other types of fish. And so, they all look the same as they're walking by, but every once in a while, one will jump out and say, I'm a prospect. And if we do it right, we'll get more and more of those. And so we want to make sure that we have a way to bring the event host on board as a partner so that they're helping us to continue to evolve what we get out of their event. And if they're not willing to do anything or they're not willing to partner in that way, I think that's going to tell you a lot. But you'll find by and large, if you come with good information that they can respond to in a comparative way, they're going to help you in ways that you really can't even guess. And the cool thing is that as an event host, you have a lot of flexibility and different things that you can do to enhance somebody's experience. And so, again, the key is to really leverage that. So seeking continuous improvement, evolving that. Again, events are a long-term strategy. Negotiating concessions, adjusting your strategy, being flexible to that as you go, and understand that you need to evolve the target, the persona that you're aiming at, not just as your business evolves, as the market evolves, but each show is going to have unique personas that will be most evident there, and you really want to make sure you take advantage of that. So again, we're going to finish where we started, and that is we want to, from an economic development standpoint, it's really about nurturing our economy in a way that we really grow well and effectively and fast. And we're going to do that through both recruiting businesses to our region and then also helping the businesses from our region promote and grow their sales and headcount and help our economy in that way as well. So the trade shows and the pavilion hosting can have huge benefits. So I'm gonna come back on screen here in just a second. I want to make sure that you know about our webinar that's going to go on this coming Tuesday, February 20th. Everyone is not a prospect. Focus and win at trade shows. This is all about the persona development. So we're going to get into the weeds in this particular event and focus on helping you develop who you should be targeting at trade shows. That will help you decide which trade shows to be a part of, and then also how to be a part of them. Really, really important. So I'll leave this up just for a moment. Here's my contact info. Certainly you have it in my emails as well, but just so it's on the screen for a few seconds. And now I'm going to come back on screen and we'll see if we can't answer your questions. So in a second here, okay, good. So I'm just going to look at these questions. So we've got a whole variety of really cool questions. I'm going to there are a couple of groupings that we'll take together. So the first two questions I'm going to do together. So how do we engage client companies and help them succeed? And how do I get our exhibiting client companies to fully invest in the opportunity? So really, it's I think first is about their accountability. Look at this a lot like you might look at hiring the right person. That that we look at staffing in a large degree. Sort of people that don't staff well complain, "Gosh, this person's not performing well," and that's probably not that person's fault. We probably put them in a job for which they're not prepared to do, and we probably didn't also structure the job in a way that they can be successful. Very rarely is it someone's fault that they don't perform well. It's really about how do we select the right people, the right companies, and then put them in a situation that they can succeed. And if we have 20 exhibitors within our pavilion, there's really efficient to be able to help 20 companies perform well. Any one company has to invest a lot to get that done. To prepare 20 is actually pretty, there's incrementally not that much more difficult to prepare one or 20 versus one. So how do we engage those client companies and help them succeed? First is selection. We want to have the right companies, and then we want to give them a process, preparation, training, a good orientation to what success looks like and how do they get the most out of this, and then support them through the process. So it's really about sort of getting them, not just getting them to to leading them to water, but also helping them drink, and then making sure the follow-up happens, because nothing just getting a stack of cards isn't success. Number one, they have to be the right stack of cards. Number two is we have to make sure we follow up and leverage what we created. So let's go to the second set of questions here. How do we improve the quality of leads we produce from exhibiting, and who do we focus on speaking with? So first, the buyer persona. We want to make sure we're really accurate in terms of who we're trying to attract, and then from once we have that buyer persona, having an offer that only that persona is interested in. So imagine, during the course of the day, 10,000 people walking by your booth and 50 really good prospects stopping by. You'd be pretty happy with that probably. And so it's how do we have an offer that just those prospects are interested in? That's really the magic of it. And again, that we're going to spend a lot more time on that on Tuesday. But number one, identify what that ideal target looks like, and then have an offer that only they're interested in. If you're familiar with inbound marketing from an online marketing standpoint, this methodology is very much the same. This will sound fairly familiar to those that are. We're just taking that methodology and moving it to an in-person event. So, and it's like magic. And I'm just realizing now I'm taking these in a different order than I had on the screen, but that's okay. I apologize for that. But so the next grouping are how do you pick the right trade shows? And then how do we select the best floor location? So picking the best trade shows, we talked about sort of number one is understanding our buyer persona. Who do we want to target? Then finding events that they are frequenting or associations that they're frequenting and so on. And then identifying which of those based on certain criteria are the highest value. In other words, sort of the cost versus the benefit is the best ratio, and then making a plan to participate in those. And we may exhibit, we may sponsor, we may walk through, we may speak, we may attend. There are all different types of ways that we can take advantage of these events. We might have a hospitality event. There are all sorts of ways. So it's not just picking the right shows, but picking the right mode of participation or modes. Um, Picking the right floor location, I think there are some general schools of thought. If there are some good anchor tenants, good anchor areas that you want to associate with, maybe there are some partners that you can be near that would be attractive for you. Think of like the auto mile where, sort of cars are all available and it's easy for the buyer to find the car that's most appropriate for them. Uh, and so you want to find that spot. I think it's sometimes easier to decide where you don't want to be, and so being off in a corner in a low traffic area is more challenging. Certainly, being on a corner and on Main Street or the most sort of high uh, production area is going to be good. So it's usually you think either at an entrance, ideally the front entrance, the one that's going to have the most traffic, maybe near the workshop rooms, if or a specific workshop room, if the workshops are going to be accessible from the floor. And again, there may be food, or maybe you may want to be near the bar. I mean, I think it really depends. It's somewhat situational on the specific show, but ultimately, it's really about aligning yourself with the traffic that you think will be most valuable. So, how do we create a welcoming pavilion? So, yeah, again, I think it really depends if you want to just sort of represent your area and be known as the host and just sort of have anyone come, then thinking about that in a general sense is fine. Normally, we're thinking about it in terms of we want to be welcoming to our target persona. Again, thinking about that fish, we don't necessarily want the flounder to stop by. We don't want the bass to stop by. We want only the tuna to stop by, and so we're going to set up our pavilion so it's most attractive for tuna, and they'll stop by because we've done that. And all the other fish, the salmon and so on, will all swim by, and we'll be okay with that. That's a good thing. More is not better. Better is better. And so we want to make sure we're welcoming to the right audience. Is there a good system for follow-up? I think, yeah, number one is having a thank you note that goes out immediately. I mean, like the day you leave the show. And that could be a broadcast note, but thanks people for stopping by and maybe connects them to additional information. And then individual follow-up, again, either by phone or email, that sets up a time for a more substantive conversation. And then they go into the lead nurturing system. So there's an ongoing set of touches that happen over time. Let's see. Oh, and the last question, again, feel free if you like to submit additional questions. But the last question here is, do you have any tips on how to get a better deal from the event organizer? Yeah, and I think first and foremost is having a solid method by which we made our original decisions. And we usually suggest going through that sort of event decision process and adjusting on a quarterly basis. So, in other words, we're refreshing what events are available, showing all the available events against those criteria, and having that ranking so we can continue to adjust what events we're looking at and making decisions to participate in. And so, as we come back to talk to the organizations whose events we've done historically, then we can show them how their particular event is performing against the other events that we've done, or how they performed this year versus last year. There are a lot of comparisons that we can show, but ultimately we're going to do a lot better at negotiating when we have history and when we can show, heck, we're really focused on performing well at these. We've done our stuff, and your event, as good as it is, and we're not complaining, but it's not performing at the level that we need it to against what else we're seeing in the market. And you can see, here our cost per lead is X, and at your events our cost per lead is 3X, and we need to get it down to X. How do we do that? And so again, there are a lot of ways that this can be done, but ultimately, the more that you have that history to be able to relate to the host company that's running the trade show, the more likely they are to sit on the same side of the table with you and try to solve the issue. So that again, it's not about getting the price down; it's about getting your cost per lead down or your cost per close down. It's almost irrelevant what you pay. It's what it's worth. That's really important. So I don't see any other questions. Those are the questions that we had today. I'm certainly happy to talk to anyone offline. We'll do some follow up. We'll send this recording out to everyone as well as a quick survey, and we'd sure appreciate learning more about what you all do. And if there's anything we can do to help, we'd certainly be glad to do that. But it's been a pleasure to talk to you today. And again, we'll follow up. But if there are any immediate questions, please don't hesitate to email me. And I'll look forward to talking with you all real soon. So thanks so much. Enjoy the rest of your day. Bye for now.